what is the starting point for folks that do want to set goals and actually try to achieve them? Like, what's the starting point for them?
I have a 3-part process. So do you mind if I go into all 3 parts?
Please. Yeah. Yeah.
Dope. I think that it's always a part of looking at what is the end result we're gunning for. So AKA, what is level 100 here?
Mhm.
I always think about it as if you're at a bar, you're playing darts, right? And if you don't know where the bullseye is, hell, if you don't even have a dartboard to begin with, you're just shooting darts and making little holes in the wall.
Yeah.
But if you have a dartboard, you know the bullseye. So level 1 is figure out your bullseye. So this doesn't have to be a short-term goal. This can be 3 months. This can be 5 months. This can be 3 years. I like to never go longer than 3 years just because nowadays we don't really have that attention span anymore,
Sure.
unless it's something that's like, I am so fired up on this, but a lot of times people get distracted and the fire kind of dims from that. So I like to do anything but from 3 months to 3 years as the long-term goal. Step 2 is if that's our level 100, great. We have 1 through 99 to figure out, but I don't care about 2 through 99. I care about 1. That's all I care about.
Hey, this is a quick shout out from one of our awesome sponsors. Check this out. Thank you to Tracy down at Tranquil Turtle Massage in downtown Coeur d'Alene. Look, my wife and I, we see Tracy and her team every single month for a couples massage, and it is the best thing. Tracy is a master massage specialist and a Hanu Ashiatsu trainer. You need to reach out to Tracy and her team. Make sure that you tell them that I sent you, and you'll get $25 off your next massage. Also, while you're there, check out CDA Brows, Body, and Ink. Make sure to tell Tracy that I sent you, and you'll save $100 on your next tattoo, brows, and plasma tightening services.
Nicole, you're a life coach. You're the host of the Imperfect Success podcast. You're an international speaker, goal-setting specialist, where you help perfectionists set goals and then actually achieve them, and so much more. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. I'm stoked to be talking to you today.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I like to kick the show off by going back a bit. Your website mentions that you grew up in a personal development world. Like, where did you grow up? What was childhood like for you?
I like to always say I grew up in like a unicorn family, basically. Okay. So both my parents worked for some of the top dogs in the personal development field, like Tony Robbins is obviously going to be one of the big ones. And so we were always attending seminars. We were listening to the audio tapes. I would, go to these seminars and see these people walking across fire, climbing these telephone poles, having these moments of going from I'm not enough to I am enough. And just like seeing that dichotomy was just like a 5-year-old, like, oh my God, I'm a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with the world from there. However, big pivot happened when I was in like middle school age. I started becoming, I hate the word victim. I really don't like using it very often, but I'm going to use it here for lack of a better one.
Sure.
Victim of severe childhood bullying to the point where I was called names I will never call another human in my life. I was pushed into bathrooms. It got physical sometimes. And there was one specific day where I was locked in a bathroom stall. Like these kids were like banging on the door, just like, and I was just like in a puddle on the ground. And something in me snapped where it said, if you're not who everyone else needs you to be, aka if you're not absolutely perfect, you're going to continue getting hurt physically and mentally. And that one decision changed my life for about 10 years. It was crazy how the power of decisions, I'm sure you've seen this in your own life, the power of decisions when we're young. And so as a result, I went to this school. I still had that high achiever in me, the Tony Robbins household couldn't beat that out of me too much. But I went to a musical theater school, one of the top in the nation, because that was like really where I found my voice again. I started finding like, oh, I can play big, I can be loud, but it was always behind a character. So that was the safe way of doing it, right? But I went to a musical theater college and I had such severe anxiety, such severe perfectionism. Like I was procrastinating, I was having panic attacks, I was drinking myself to blackout every weekend because I just like couldn't handle and I needed to numb. And if you're a singer for your career, drinking doesn't really help that. So I was finally told by my professor, you're going to leave the school. Like your degree is not going to happen unless you perform a miracle, basically. Wow. And so I called my dad, who's a life coach as well. And he was like, we're going to turn some stuff around. And I was like, I need to implement the tools from childhood. I never did that before. They always just lived in my head.
Sure.
But I never implemented them. And that was the change of almost everything that has changed the trajectory of my life now.
Wow. What a cool story. I mean, outside of the bullying part, but like to grow up in a family like that, and then, kind of to deal with the adversity outside of that, and then have that whole flip come back where you're now the life coach on this. And what a cool story. I actually just spoke to Erik Robbins this week on my podcast.
Stop. Oh my gosh. How funny.
And, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins. And so for like me to even have Erik on the show, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to Erik. Like, and it was cool. Tony's definitely on my guest wish list for sure.
Oh yeah.
But man, what a crazy thing. And then to be able to flip everything around. I love that. And I mean, talk about like being transparent, because that's what makes the biggest impact. When you share your story like you just did, man, I just know there's so many people that just heard that and was like, man, time to make some changes. And you're right. You're one decision away from changing your life at any point.
Yeah.
And that's really what I kind of tell during my story as well. And I actually worked in the music business for a while, and worked for Universal Records in my early 20s. So I saw the musicians kind of taking their career, and I was hanging out backstage with guys, and it would be like, these guys have a perfect life, but they're back here doing drugs and drinking themselves to sleep every night. I'm like, man, this is crazy.
It was a lot of that, like a lot of people who put on this front, and a lot in the performing world, like put on this front of everything's great, everything's fine, I'm perfect, I'm great. And then in the back end, they are, like I one time was walking in the practice rooms, because we had these like just like halls and halls of practice rooms at my school, and they were completely soundproof. So it was very weird. Now you think back at it, it's like these like halls of just like these teeny tiny windows that are completely soundproof. And I remember walking past one day and seeing through a window this one person who just like I looked up to so much. She seemed like she had it all together, and she was in the fetal position sobbing on the phone. And I was like, wow. Okay, you need to remember that there's always more to the story than we think we see. And I think this is really prevalent nowadays with social media, because we see everyone's highlight reel. We see like, look at me, I'm making X amount of money. Look at me, I'm traveling to Italy. Look at me, I got married, da, 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 da. And it's great. That's awesome. But there's always more to the story. And yet we compare ourselves to that highlight reel so much.
So much. Oh, man. I want to jump into goals, because people set goals all the time. And some of those goals, they just get kind of put to the wayside or never get accomplished. Why is it that folks set goals and then ditch them? And I'm guilty of this for sure. But, setting these goals, what distracts people from really going towards them or achieving them?
Buckle up, buttercups. Let's dive into this. I would say the biggest thing that I see, because I work with a lot of high achievers, people who are, entrepreneurs, they have like 45 goals they're going after at any given point. But what I see so often is that we're going to make this super easy math. People are going after goals that are at a level 100. Let's say it's running a marathon, hitting a certain figure in your business, starting a family, like these bigger goals. And yet they're over here at level 0 trying to just plop right down at level 100 and wondering why that's not working. And what happens as a result is, either one of two things. You'll either push so hard to try to get to level 100 as fast as possible, and, that just never leads to a good road. It's normally a burnout. It's normally, a lot of your life is neglected and stuff like that. The other road is people get so overwhelmed by all the steps that need to happen in between 0 to 100 that they're like, you know what? I'm not really feeling it today. Scrolling through social media feels fun, or cleaning out my email is a great productive use of my time right now. So we can like scratch that productive itch without actually moving ourselves forward. So that would be the two main inhibitors I see that people use as crutches pretty often to not allow them to go after their goals.
Man, that's so good. Like, what is the starting point for folks that do want to set goals and actually try to achieve them? Like, what's the starting point for them?
I have a 3-part process. So do you mind if I go into all 3 parts?
Please. Yeah.
Dope. I think that it's always a part of looking at what is the end result we're gunning for. So AKA, what is level 100 here? I always think about it as, if you're at a bar, you're playing darts, right? And if you don't know where the bullseye is, hell, if you don't even have a dartboard to begin with, you're just shooting darts and making little holes in the wall. But if you have a dartboard, you know the bullseye. So level 1 is figure out your bullseye. So this doesn't have to be a, short-term goal. This can be 3 months. This can be 5 months. This can be 3 years. I like to never go longer than 3 years, just because nowadays we don't really have that attention span anymore, unless it's something that's like, I am so fired up on this, but a lot of times people get distracted and the fire kind of dims from that. So I like to do anything but from 3 months to 3 years as the long-term goal. Step 2 is, if that's our level 100, great. We have 1 through 99 to figure out, but I don't care about 2 through 99. I care about 1. That's all I care about. What is the next step for you? Now, here's where I see a lot of people get in their own way. they're like, okay, my next step is this big old thing that's, 2 months. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
I want like 1 to 2 weeks milestone goal is what I call these milestone goals. The reason is because if we make it too far, we always make it about the end result. Okay, when I reach that, then I'll be happy. When I reach this next thing, then I'll be happy. Versus if we make it a short-term goal, we accomplish it. Oh, sweet. Yeah, let me move on to step 2. Okay, yeah, I've hit step 2, next step, and it makes it about the journey more so than the destination of level 100. Making sense?
Yes. Yeah. Come on.
So that's step 2. And then we go one step deeper. We got our first milestone goal. Now, what are all the teeny tiny little tasks that it's going to take to accomplish first goal? I'll see people have like on their to-do list or on their calendar, just like a time block for milestone goal. And it's like, maybe milestone goal is, let's say outline website or something like that. If you're starting your website, that's something that could activate the fight, flight, freeze mechanism in our brain, which will cause us to procrastinate. So instead, what I do with people is I break these down into what I call one sitting tasks. This is actually something I learned from Tony Robbins. And from one sitting tasks, it's what little teeny tiny tasks that I can do in one sitting will finally be able to check off this milestone goal. So sometimes it's 2 one-sitting tasks, sometimes it's 15. It really depends. But then those are the things we either plug into your calendars or we put on your to-do list, because then it doesn't activate the amygdala fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah. Come on. What do you see high achievers doing different than folks that are just kind of sliding by through life?
Dreaming big.
Dreaming big.
They're always dreaming big. And I think that's really special. And I see them get into that habit of level 100 or bust, level 100 or bust. So it's a catch-22, but it's a really good catch-22 if you use it right. The other thing I see high achievers do often, and this is maybe not so much in the good side, it's definitely more so how we get in our own way, is high achievers tend to beat themselves up or almost self-flagellate themselves to get to the next level. They'll say, I'm not doing enough, so until I get to this point, then I'm finally enough. And it's this constant moving finish line, because by the time, I don't know if you experience this, when I was super in my negative side of my high achieverness, the high achiever in me will never die, but the negative side definitely needed to die. Let me be real.
Yeah.
When I would achieve a certain goal, I would celebrate myself for maybe 6 minutes. And then I'd be like, okay, but what's the next thing? Because that's, never mind, that's actually going to be what makes me happy. And so what I see a lot of high achievers do is just beat themselves up saying, I'm not enough until I reach X. I'm not enough until I do Y. And what I think a big thing for us to learn is how can we appreciate who we are right now while still celebrating the fact that we are goal-getters, we're strivers. But a lot of people appreciate the now or love myself or whatever. I think that's a really overused term right now, but I mean it in like the core version of itself, love myself. But a lot of people see that as, but then I'm going to become mediocre or complacent and I won't have that hunger anymore. The opposite couldn't be more true. The hunger is still there. It's never going to die.
Yeah.
You just don't beat yourself up along the way, which is pretty nice. Yeah.
Now, when you're setting a goal and you don't accomplish it, or you get sidetracked and you just kind of forget about the goal, like how do you get back on track though?
Ooh, what a good, I don't really get asked this question very much. So this is a fun one to be asked.
So,
I'd say the big thing is ask yourself, why did I get sidetracked? Because if we don't go to the root cause, it's going to keep happening. It's like going into your garden and having a bunch of weeds and just clipping off the tops of them. They're still going to keep growing, right? So we need to look at what's the root of this. So maybe it was, this next step in my goal, this next maybe milestone goal is really out of my comfort zone. And I feel really scared and I feel like I'm not enough to achieve it. We need to address that. But a lot of high achievers tend to be like, la, 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 I don't want to talk about emotions. I'm going to go to the next thing. But what they do is instead they fill their calendars with being busy with pointless tasks that are not really things that actually move them forward, but that are, again, scratching that busyness itch or scratching that, I'm productive. So I would go to the core of like, why did you get sidetracked in the first place? Okay, great. What happened right before then? What was the thing that almost triggered the sidetracking? And how can we address that? Because I'm not interested in just like putting a Band-Aid over a wound. I want to figure out how can we seal it up from the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Come on. That's so good. This is such a great conversation. I love this stuff so much. I'm a big fan of like getting out of your comfort zone, and I'm very comfortable behind the mic. I'm almost at 500 episodes of doing
Hell yeah.
podcasting now since the years, and I love to just, like I said, get out of the my comfort zone. But what do you think keeps folks in their comfort zone? Like, why are they so afraid to step out of that?
I asked this question so long, and growing up in personal development, especially like the personal development of the 80s and 90s, which tended to be a lot more like white knuckle it through life
Totally.
and push forward, where now I think we've definitely moved away from that, and I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, I was like, okay, just push yourself out of the comfort zone, and that's what you do. But then I'm a big neuroscience person. I think it's important to know how our brain works, because I like to know the why behind things. And what I learned is that our brain is actually programmed to keep us in the comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for instance, way, way, way back when we were in our caveman days, if I was outside of my comfort zone, I was, maybe exploring on my own. I was hunting away from the tribe. I was basically sentencing myself to death, a possible death by like saber-toothed tiger face off anyone, right? And while we have evolved so much, that core function of our brain of outside of the comfort zone equals death, it's still there. Now, maybe writing a scary email that's pitching yourself to a really big platform isn't a saber-toothed tiger anymore, but our brains still get activated in that same way. So I could spew off something about like, oh, we're just, focusing on the wrong thing and da-da-da, but I really want to get to the core of it's because our brain is programmed to do so. Now, the best part is we are very intelligent humans who can override our base level human programming, which, like, can we get a freaking awesome for that for a second?
Yeah.
But we have to do so consciously. And that automatic behavior, it's not going to change because it's your brain doing exactly what it's supposed to. But we have to catch that automatic behavior and consciously override it.
Man. Yes, I love that. And I'm putting myself out in the comfort zone, getting out of my comfort zone right now with like I started doing Toastmasters recently, and just getting up and speaking in front of people, which I've not done a ton of. I've done tons of my podcast shows, but never in front of public speaking scenarios, right? And so push myself out there to do that, and it's so relieving though. Like, it's scary at first, but then you get out there, you're like, oh yeah, I can do this. It's no big deal, So first, I want to talk about your podcast, because I love talking to other podcasters. You have this amazing podcast called the Imperfect Success. It's ranked in the top 2.5% globally. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Why did you decide to start the podcast, and how has it helped you in your business?
It's funny because I've had the podcast for, oh golly, almost 4 years, maybe even 4+ years. And originally I started it just because I loved listening to other podcasts. And I was like, how hard could this be? Oh, sweet summer child. It was so hard. But I started it, quite frankly, just because I love talking to people in almost more of an intimate setting. I saw a lot of people like excelling at, more social media facing platforms and stuff like that. And I was like, those are cool, but I'm not a short form person. I am, let's get down and dirty into the deep conversations kind of person. And that was really the wish for the podcast. Now, it's gone through so many iterations, just like many good things. We started off as something called Captivating Creatives back when I was still coaching performers. Then it moved into the Life Coach Baker podcast, which was kind of my blanket name for everything. And then very recently, we actually switched over to Imperfect Success, because I wanted to make sure it was not about me, it's about the person. And I wanted everything from the name to even reflect that. And so what I love about podcasting, though, and I'm curious if you experience this, when I'm listening to a podcast I love, whether it's on personal development, whether it's on my latest fantasy obsession, because I love reading like novels and House of the Dragon and stuff like that. Nice. I'm such a nerd in that way. But if I'm listening to something, it is going to be eventually, the host is going to become my best friend, whether they know I exist or not. Because I'm constantly filling my ears with them. And I didn't even do this intentionally, but what I realized is that people in my community, in my business community, started being like, I feel like we're best friends, and yet here I am introducing myself to you for the first time. One of the ways I think it's most helped my business, which was honestly unintentional, was me being able to immediately penetrate that know, like, and trust factor just through talking into a microphone. And that was awesome. I'm curious, have you experienced that with your listeners as well?
Yeah, it's been fun. And the podcast for me has developed so many opportunities, so many relationships. Some of my closest friends are people that I've either had on my show or I was a guest on their show or we just met through the podcasting community. But you run into people like, man, I feel like I've heard your story, but I'm meeting you for the first time, like you said. And I love that aspect of it because I'm big on meeting new people. I try to meet as many people as I can. I was a guest on Brad Lee's podcast and sitting down with Brad Lee and chatting one time, he was like, look, man, relationships is the new currency. And I just kind of took that to heart. I'm like, man, I just want to meet as many people as I can and just love on them, whatever they're doing. It's not my job to judge them. My job is just to love people where they're at. And I've really taken that to heart through podcasting, the listeners. And I about once a quarter, I'll interview somebody here locally in Coeur d'Alene where I'm at. And so I can go meet them in person and then they can kind of share the story locally and stuff like that. So it's fun to do that. And man, yeah, podcasting has been a game changer for me since I started. I've had a lot of changes of my podcasting since I started in 2017 as well.
Oh yeah. Man, you said relationships are the new currency and that like hit somewhere deep. I love that so much.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Brad was such a cool person to have on the show. And I kind of had this personal goal to be a guest on 100 podcasts in 2021. I was like, I could do that. No problem. And I was also I had 2 podcasts at the time. So I released 100 of my own shows that year. But I finished that year doing 117 podcast interviews on other people's podcasts.
Holy moly.
It was absolutely insane. I'll tell you, by the end of 2021, I was like, all right, I'm not talking to anybody for like 2 months. Like, I got to take a break. It's like, it was a wild year, but that's what really kind of took my show to the next level was just getting out there as much as I could and just offering value for free to whatever people I could and meeting as many people as I could. And it was just an amazing aspect of the podcast world for that.
Oh, I echo that so much. I love that part of just being able to meet people. And I feel like also everyone who's a podcaster just knows we all just like know something that non-podcasters don't, and that is the hustle of podcasting.
Yes.
Like it is so, at least when I was first starting, I didn't see that the woes of podcasting, the hard, exterior that you need to have as a podcaster. Like your reviews are on display. The amount of times I had people, this is actually funny, at the very beginning, I had some trolls on the internet come out and be like, it'd be a lot easier to take you seriously if you didn't sound like a Disney princess all the time. And geez. I literally was like, I have some choice words for you, sir. Totally. But it was so funny to me eventually that I actually incorporated it as a part of my intro for my podcast for a really long time, where I was like, I might have the voice of a sassy Cinderella, I think was the exact phrasing I used. But like, you have to have that hard shell. And I think that's for any, external facing person. But when it comes to podcasting, again, that intimacy factor, it's there because it's just you, a microphone, sometimes a guest, but that's it. And that it just takes an extra special kind of authenticity and bravery that I sure as heck did not have when I was first starting. It's taken 4 years to exercise that muscle.
I'm still trying to learn stuff. And, when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. I was in a walk-in closet and bad lighting and bad microphone, didn't even look into the camera. And I was recording on like FaceTime or Ecamm or something like Skype. And I was uploading to YouTube and called that my podcast. I literally released 100 episodes before someone said, well, how can I listen to it on Apple? And I said, what the hell is that? I didn't even know what Apple Podcast was. It's like, okay, now I got a whole other market I can market to, so yeah, it was this journey and I'm constantly just trying to learn and improve as a podcaster. And that's why I love talking to other podcasters too. It's someone had mentioned something when I had them on my show. It's like podcasting is kind of like this intimate conversation, like you mentioned, but as a listener, it's like you're this guy who's like secretly looking behind the curtain and listening to this intimate conversation between two people, like almost like creepishly, but you get to know them and it just like opens up this door of amazingness that happens,
That's so unbelievably accurate. I love how that person described it. And I want to say this to people who might be listening who are like, I want to start a podcast or I want to start a YouTube channel or something like that. But I feel, again, like going back to that level 100 thing, I feel like I have to drop down at the level of Erik or I have to drop down at the level of Nicole. Yeah. And that feels intimidating. That feels overwhelming. Go back and listen to both of our first episodes. I won't speak for you, Erik. Mine's terrible.
Totally. Mine is horrible. Yeah.
And I had a client actually who was wanting to, I think she was starting a Instagram for her business. And she was like, I just feel like I have to like be at a certain level, And I was like, okay, who's someone you look up to on Instagram? And she's like, I don't know, like you, I guess. And I was like, well, thank you. I'm flattered. Go back to my first video, like scroll back, take the 15 minutes it's going to take to scroll back. And I want you to watch my first video.
Yeah.
She did. within 5 minutes after watching that first video, her Instagram was created.
Come on.
And I was like, thank you
So good.
very much.
So good.
But it's true. We put ourselves on this like insane standard where we're trying to meet people who are, maybe 15, 20 levels above us. And it's like, you have to do level 1. You have to do the hard work where you don't have the teams, or you don't have the knowledge of the branding or the hoodoo or the Riverside or whatever it is. Like, you have to do the messy work in order to get to that level 25 and level 100 and beyond.
Come on, man. That's so good. So good. I know we're right at time. I love to ask my guests, though, a question that I'm a big music guy. So I love to ask the question, like, what type of music do you listen to? Do you have a favorite band that you like to listen to?
Favorite band? Yes and no. I'm going to give 2 answers if that's all right. So I am, like I mentioned, I'm big into the neuroscience, and I love studying flow state. I love studying focus and what that looks like in productivity. So I actually, every year on my Spotify Wrapped, my number 1 song is a meditation prayer song that I use for flow state every single day. It's on loop, just over and over and over every day. Would I say that's my favorite song? Not necessarily, but it works for me every time to get into flow state, and that's a Divi prayer. However, for I'm a big like Struts, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco. Like, I love to like rock out a little in my heart and soul, but like kind of like my inner emo kid. So for me right now, my favorite song Could Have Been Me by the Struts.
Okay. Oh man, so good. And you mentioned Fall Out Boy. I just remember like their first album when I was in Hawaii when it first came out, and I was like, "Who was this band?" All right, I'm just gonna do it. And man, I've just been a fan of those guys forever. But I'm a rocker at heart. Listened to metal all through high school, all through my early 20s. And when I worked for Universal, they said, "Oh, you actually have to listen to other kinds of music. You can't just listen to metal."
So there's other kinds of music? I didn't know that.
Yeah, right. One of those type things. Okay. Yes. Yeah. We can get into it on your show, but like, I literally I was the intern guy when I first started, and said, "Hey, you get to dress like a chicken and go promote Ludacris's Chicken and Beer album in the hood." And I was literally dressed like a chicken in the hood of Seattle, Washington, passing out these buckets of chicken and beer. Wildest thing ever, but that's
Eric,
how I got started.
I'm going to make you dive into that story on my show. Oh my God. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Back in the day, it was fun times for sure.
First, I haven't heard that one.
Nicole, This conversation was so amazing. You're an absolute world changer. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. That means more than I can even tell you. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for checking out the show today. I really appreciate it. I hope that my guest was able to bring you some amazing wisdom and knowledge to help you continue to fight for your goals, your dreams, and your purpose. If you could do me one big favor and just hit that subscribe button, I would so appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Keep changing the world. I believe in you. Have an amazing day.